It's Wednesday, I've got a gap between some of my in-person clients today, and so we're gonna train some arms. You may be interested, you may not. I guess we'll know if you stick around and watch the video. Gonna squeeze a little bit of shoulder work in as well. With shoulders, especially lateral raise variations, I tend to find them really boring. I train them multiple times per week and I just do a little bit. So I might do a lateral raise variation 3 times a week, but I'll just do like 2 tough sets each time. I'm not suggesting it's more effective than doing it a different way. It's more just, I find them very dull and boring. So I just do 2 tough sets and then move on. In terms of warming up, you don't need a warm up. You don't need to go and do any mobility work. You don't need to foam roll or stretch. You probably don't need to do any cardio or anything like that beforehand. If I was doing a big session with compound movements, if I was doing other more complex movements, I would probably do a few minutes on an assault bike, maybe a minute or 2 of light dynamic stretching. But let's be honest, you can just get on with the first exercise if you're doing like an arm day and just do a couple of really light warm-up sets. Really simple for me, the aim today, just gonna be working up to a couple of tough sets around the 6 to 10 rep range. 15 is probably for the final warm-up. While we're on the topic of warm-up sets or build-up sets, whatever you call them, just do as much as you feel you need to get to the next weight. So don't necessarily want to be doing a full set of 6 to 10 with the 15s if I'm gonna give the 20s a go. I think I did 3 reps there. That's more than enough. Sometimes I'll just do 2 if it's the final weight before a working set. You're just getting used to movement, just getting the nervous system sort of ramped up a little bit. If I do a full set of 10, it's probably going to be relatively fatiguing, which will impact my working set with the 20s. And I think I would recommend this approach for most exercises. If you're working up to some tough sets of a leg press for 10 repetitions, you probably don't want to be doing 10 reps in your final warm-up set. A couple of reps is perfectly fine, just to get that last little bit of your nervous system ramped up and to make sure that you aren't fatigued going into your actual working sets, which are the important ones. Give 20s a go. Six reps, I think. Gonna take a minute or 2 and then drop back down to 15s and see if we can hit something closer to 10. Second set, final set of this, see what we can get with 15s. There we go, that's it. 2 sets of lateral raises, done. Move on to the next exercise. So I've changed my mind. I'm gonna do 1 set of cable raises. Again, a lateral raise variation. I just feel like doing it today. So 1 set, gonna take it to failure. Again, 6 to 10 is the rough aim. The thing to remember, I keep going on about this on Instagram, is with the rep ranges, they're just guidelines. They're not a set prescription. They're not rules that you have to stop at a certain point. When we're doing an exercise to build muscle, the aim within the set, or the aim for the set, is to create a signal for the body to adapt. And so you need to take it very close to muscular failure. If you say you're gonna do 6 to 10 reps, and it's a working set, and you stop at 10 because you've said I'm gonna do 6 to 10, but you could have done 14, then it's probably not a particularly productive and effective set. You're better off aiming for 6 to 10, realizing that you have undershot the weight, and stopping early around the 6 rep mark, and just counting it as a warm-up set, not as a working set, or getting to that 10th rep, realizing you've got plenty left in the tank, and just continuing on and doing 12 or 13. And then next time you come to that exercise, you can just increase the weight and do a few repetitions. But essentially what you're trying to do is get close to failure. Cable raise at this angle is likely to work my deltoids just slightly differently. I'm not going to say it's better or worse than a dumbbell, just different and interesting. I've forgotten what reps I'm on because I've been nattering. All right, that's enough shoulders. I think fundamentally, the reason why people don't see their triceps develop as much as other muscle groups is because they don't take every set to that truly challenging point. Again, part of that is making the mistake of assigning a specific rep range and just stopping there arbitrarily. You know, doing 3 sets of 10 and doing those 3 sets of 10, but not reflecting upon how close to failure you got in those sets. So for me, I usually pick 2 tricep exercises. Over the last few weeks, I've been doing a standard cable pushdown with the V-bar. I like using the V-bar rather than the ropes and straps. I can use a little bit more weight. I can get a bit more stability. It's a solid object rather than using something like a strap, which is fine. And I can arguably get more range of movement, but I just can't lift as much weight. And my ego gets the better of me, clearly. And then I'll go into a free weight exercise with dumbbells or a barbell, which we'll get into in a second. While we're on the subject of using this particular bit of equipment, a way you can get more out of this is try and set up with the bar as low down your hand as possible towards your wrist. Obviously not actually on your wrist, but if you're setting up in your fingers, then it's going to be a lot harder to control at the wrist. And you can see my wrist extending. As I press down, I'm going to cock my wrist back, and we don't want that to happen. Same as when you're bench pressing, like you want the bar slightly lower. The higher the bar is up here, the more likely you are to extend at the wrist, and it's just not a stronger position to do the exercise from. So when you're setting up, for the most part, I actually like to go thumbless rather than here, because I can just get my hand slightly higher. And what I'm doing is I'm sitting the majority of the bar in the pad of my thumb, and that's where I'm pressing down the most, rather than there. Like the bar's not going to go anywhere. If I have my hands open complete like this, the bar's not going to go anywhere. So I don't really need to grip it. What I want to do is be in a position where I am at my strongest. And so if the bar is sitting towards the pad of my thumb and we're looking at the wrist, do it this way, or this way actually, I've got a left hand, haven't I? If the bar is sitting on the pad of my thumb, the moment arm, the lever length of the phrases to my wrist is this long. If the bar sits up here in my fingers, it's twice as far. And so it's going to be a lot more challenging for the muscles of my forearm, my grip, my hand to control that weight, to transfer force into it. So have the bar on the pad of your thumbs, have it closer towards your wrists, as long as it's not uncomfortable, obviously. All I'm going to do is work up to a single top set of around 10 to 12 repetitions. If I can, I'll try and beat last week's, even if it's just by like 500 grams. I'll show you, I'll put a small plate on, and then based on that weight, I will then drop down to about 85%, give or take, and I'll do one more set for as many reps as I can based upon that top set. And this is something I really like using in my training and a lot of my clients' training. You know, like your ability or your performance is going to fluctuate on a day-to-day basis based upon how well you've slept, how stressed you are, what's going on in your life at the moment. And so try to focus on the process rather than the outcome. Try to focus on your effort rather than the specific numbers. You know, like have the numbers in mind, but also appreciate that you might be a little bit stronger on some days and you might be a little bit weaker. And so long as you're training hard, those fluctuations are going to be normal and they'll average out in the end. But what you can do is you can base some of your sets on what you do that day. So for instance, if I work up to 100 kilos on this today, then I know if I'm dropping to 85%, this is going to be nice easy maths for me this time, I will drop to 85 kilos on the day. But let's say I come in and I feel super strong that day and I work up to 115 kilos. Now I don't have my calculator because it's on my phone, I'm recording on my phone, but that's going to be closer to 90, 92 and a half kilos. It's still the same relative effort on the day. It's based upon what I can do on the day. But when I'm stronger, when I'm fresher, when I'm less stressed, I can make the most of that and do a little bit more. If I come in and I've had like 3 hours sleep, it's been a long day, I've not eaten enough, I've not had any coffee, and I end up lifting 85 kilos, then that 85% set is going to be slightly lighter. So that's why I like to do that. The plates on this go up in 5 kilo increments. And I think that jumping up a whole 5 is going to be a bit too much. So I'm going to put 1.25 on. Last week, I think I got 11, failed on the 12th with this weight minus the 1.25 plate. So anything 10 and above is a big win. See what we get. I think that was 12 or 13. I'll have to watch back to the video and check. Good. Weight and rep PB. Next week, probably, as long as I'm not feeling awful, I'll just make the jump to the next plate. So I'll just add another 5, take off the 1.25, 13 reps or so. It's a bit more than I like. I think 12 is about the sweet spot. Anything more just takes a lot of time. 2 things. First of all, if you are going for a really tough set, just take a few seconds before you start to compose yourself, to get into the right frame of mind. If you're about to start a set and you're looking around, you're distracted, you're having a chat, like realistically, it's unlikely that you're going to be putting in all of your focus. So just before you're going into that set, try and clear your mind, clear distractions, and just commit to this one thing. It's only going to be 10 or 12 reps. It's like 30 seconds of your life. Switch off everything else and just focus on this. Second is, if you're truly going to failure, don't worry about the exact number. Just commit to this simple process. If you lock the rep out, you go for the next one. With the tricep pushdown, if you lock that rep out, just commit to the next one. If you lock that rep out, no matter how long it takes, do the next one. Those are the only rules. Don't base your set, or don't base the end point of your set on how tough the rep was, how slow the rep was, how much of a grind it was, how much your muscles ache, how lightheaded you are feeling. Base it on whether you completed the repetition or not. And I'm actually going to change things up a little bit because I ended up getting about 12 or 13 on that. I don't really want to reduce the weight and end up doing, between 15 to 20 reps because it's going to be really boring. So I'm actually going to do the heavier set next. Is this ideal? Probably not, but in the grand scheme of things, who cares? Let's see what we can do at this weight. Suitably warmed up. I think kids these days refer to wearing a big baggy t-shirt to start with as a pump cover. I just personally like to stay warm for as long as possible. But at the same time, I'm training my arms. I'm going to end up in a vest. So this is 8.75 kilos heavier than that previous set. I've not tried this weight before on triceps, so we'll just see how it goes. Reps. Pleasantly surprised. I can probably start at that next week. Move on to the next one. I've got the sun beaming right through the tiny gap in the windows in my eyes. So this should be fun and interesting. The second tricep movement, it's actually going to be 2 movements in one set. It's going to be a mechanical drop set, which is simply going from a tougher variation of an exercise to a slightly less tough. So if you imagine going from a military press with a barbell overhead and then transitioning into a push press. Push press is obviously a military press with just a little bit of leg drive. You're going from an exercise where you can lift slightly less weight to slightly more. So it's basically like a drop set, but rather than reducing the weight, you are making the exercise variation slightly easier so that you can continue the set. One of my favorite ones to do for triceps, I'll demo without weight, is to start with a traditional dumbbell lying tricep extension or a skull crusher where the upper arm remains fixed and you bend at the elbow. And then when I hit failure, I'm going to transition into something closer to a JM press. A JM press is basically halfway between a skull crusher and a dumbbell press. So you bring the hand back, you move the elbow forward, and you end up closer to this position. So there's a bit of a push involved and there's a bit of a tricep extension as well. Traditionally, this is done with a barbell, ideally probably in something like a Smith machine. So rather than do that today, because I don't have a Smith machine, I'm just gonna start with the skull crusher and then get a few reps. In terms of reps, I've not really done this particular setup before. I've been doing other tricep exercises leading up to this week. So if I can get 4 to 6 of the skull crushers, great. And then we'll just see about the JM press. And if it's too heavy, I'll go lighter. I don't think it's going to be too light, so we don't have to worry about that. Let's give this a go. And then we'll go something like a JM press. 4 and 4, not the prettiest set in the world, especially not the JM presses. So I think what I will do for the second round is drop down to the 20s. 4 and 4, still going to be 8 reps obviously within that set. That's fantastic maths. So still really effective. I'm okay with some exercises having a little bit of a wiggle, shall we say. I'm not too fussed about form being perfect. I felt that a lot in my triceps, and to be honest, I think that's the most important thing at this stage. That's enough waffling. Let's do the next set. And JM press. That was a good set. So that's 2 exercises for triceps. That's 2 sets of each, so 4 sets in total. And for me today, that's it. I'm done for triceps. The reason that's the case for me is, first of all, time. I've got a client coming in shortly. But second of all, I have a higher frequency when it comes to training. And so I like to split my workload across the week as much as possible. You may not be in that same position. You might only be able to go to gym 2 or 3 times a week. You may only get to train your triceps once a week, in which case for yourself, it's probably worth doing another exercise of another set or 2. Although I would say ideally, from a hypertrophy perspective, you always want to try and get at least 2 touch points across the week for each muscle group. So if you currently do 3 exercises for triceps on one day, and that's the only day you'll train your triceps, I would probably actually encourage you to try and take one of those tricep exercises and plonk it on the end of another day, even if it's like a lower body day. Time to train biceps. I have a very similar approach for biceps as I do for triceps, in that I also try and train these twice a week. So for me today, it's going to be 2 exercises. On the first exercise, this is just a warm up. I'm just going to do 1 set. It's kind of like my challenge set, my one big challenge set for the session, and then I'll move into a second exercise. Now with biceps, again, a bit like triceps, I don't know whether it's just because I'm old and my elbows creak and they need some WD-40, but I do like to do 1 or 2 high rep sets of a bicep exercise just to feel like they're warmed up. And when I'm doing that set, as you can see here, I'll go through different grip positions. So at the top here, I'm trying to really turn my wrist, bring my pinky as high as I can, and then I'll move into some hammer curls, maybe some overhand ones. Basically just warming up bicep, grip, forearm muscles, elbow, shoulder, as much as I can in the build up to my one big set. First main exercise for biceps, in fact main exercise for biceps, it's going to be a preacher curl, just a few warm up reps, just make sure everything feels okay. This might be, at least currently, my favorite bicep exercise. I think one of the reasons it's so great is because it offers you that stability and support. A lot of times I'll see people do curls and their upper arm is moving, their shoulder arm is moving all over the place. This obviously does not allow you to do that. I would encourage you to opt for the single arm version. You probably have a preacher curl bench at your gym that allows you to do this, and if you like it, that's fine. Personally, the single arm variation, and I've talked about this before, just allows me to be a bit more free with my setup. So you'll notice I actually turn away from the bench. Rather than being shoulders forward and hunched over, I just prefer it to be here. I think about driving my armpit down into the bench so that I'm not being pulled over the top. I think about being strong with my wrist, so I'm not allowing my wrist to cock back. Again, I want the dumbbells high up towards my thumb pad as possible, and then I open up my torso. That for me is the most comfortable and the most effective position, and I can't do it if I'm doing 2 arms at the same time. So again, little things like that, play around with. 25 kilos last week, just about squeezed 6 out of this. So if we can get the same this week, fantastic. What I've been doing with this is just working up to 8. And if I can hit 8 comfortably, I go heavier. I think about 5 months ago, I started at about 20 kilos, and each week, either added a small amount of weight, like a 500-gram plate, which I'll use a band to strap around, or did an extra repetition. And when I got that 8th repetition, not comfortably, but pretty solidly, that was the point in which I increased the weight. So I think I got 5, maybe 6, probably 5 last week. We'll see how we get on. Just one set of this. Again, same process as with the triceps. Give yourself a few seconds to compose. Give yourself a few seconds to be prepared and get ready and focused, and then just go for it. Seven. PB. Oh, I'll take a minute and then I'll do the other arm. I've got it. I wasn't sure at the beginning of that second set, or that first set on my left, whether I had that in the tank, but 7 on each side. That's cool. So progression for that for me is simple. I stick with that weight until I can solidly knock out 8 repetitions. Then I'll increase the weight. The preacher curl can get a bit of a bad rap. You might have seen some viral videos online of people's biceps detaching. The reality is that having your arm out in here and a heavy weight in this position means that you are going to be loading the bicep when it is at its most stretched, which if you're not used to doing, can increase the likelihood of injury. You know, let's just be honest about that. If you do all your bicep curls just standing like this with a barbell, dumbbells, cables, then relatively speaking at the bottom position, there's very little load. You know, like there's not really much load on my bicep, if any, when my arm is straight down by my side, which is why it's so easy there. And it's why you can hold huge amounts of weight here, but you can't here. So with a standard bicep curl, all the resistance is sort of from here to here. There's not really anything going on here. So where the bicep is most stretched, there's very little work being done. With this exercise, because of the angle of the incline, if I wedge back here, you can see, even in this position, completely stretched, there's going to be a lot of work through my bicep, which from a hypertrophy point of view is fantastic. We're working the bicep through a bit more range of movement and we're challenging it here when we normally wouldn't. But the flip side is, if you haven't prepared your muscles for that particular work, in that particular position, that particular way, it does increase your chance of injury. This applies to everything, by the way. It's not just this particular exercise, but essentially, if you aren't used to training, if you aren't strong in a certain range of movement, then going into that range of movement with, or loading that range of movement in that particular way is going to increase your rate of injury. So if you are just getting into preacher curls, which I would strongly encourage you to do so for your biceps, go light to start with. You know, like, don't treat it as like a top effort set like I'm doing. I've been doing this exercise almost every week for like a year and a half. So it's not a new exercise to me. My arms are used to being loaded in that position. But if you're just doing this exercise for the first time, go lighter, spend more time in that stretch position, maybe even do some partials. Because like I said, if up till now, all your bicep exercises have been done with your arm pretty much down by your side, they're not used to being loaded, particularly when your arm is straight. If you're sitting up here, your bicep is now significantly loaded in that extended arm position. It's going to be a lot of work for the biceps and the tendons, which is fine if your body's prepared for it. If it's not, just go lighter. Don't train to failure. You know, I want to get that caveat out there. Preacher curls done, open hand exercise done. I quite like switching to something like a neutral grip, a bit more work for the forearm muscles, a little bit less strain on the elbow itself. So I'll tend to do one heavy set of hammer curls, 8 to 10 reps. 10 repetitions, just hammer curls, next set, slightly lighter, slightly higher repetitions. And you know, while I'm taking a minute, trying to catch my breath between hammer curls, how embarrassing. I definitely need to do a bit more cardio. I think one of the things I'd like for you to take away from this video is how little you need to do in terms of overall work, so long as the work you are doing is incredibly effective. 1 or 2 really tough sets of each, creating that signal for growth, and then moving on to another body part, moving on to another movement, just going home and eating and coming back and doing it again. Generally speaking, you are better off doing less, better. If that makes sense? Right, enough waffling, 20s. Cool. Biceps done. Easy. 2 exercises, 3 sets. Done really well. Taken to failure. Let's move on. A few tough sets for deltoids, a few tough sets for triceps, a few tough sets for biceps. We're going to finish off with some forearms. And again, same approach across the week. I like to train these relatively frequently. I've got some bits and pieces at home. And forearms are one of those things where you probably can train them relatively frequently. There's not a huge amount of range of movement. You know, it's not like with your quads where you look at the distance a barbell or a leg press travels when you're doing a squatting variation. You know, the range of movement with a wrist curl is this. And so you can probably train them relatively frequently, you know, 3+ times a week. And I think one of the advantages of doing so is that you don't need much kit to do it. I have a couple of kettlebells and a barbell and some odds and ends at home. And so what I like to do is just find 10 minutes twice a week at home, and then I just go and smash out some forearm training. So again, rather than spending half an hour in the gym training my forearms, I'll just do 5 minutes now at the end of a session, and then, Wednesday today? On Friday I'll do 10 minutes. On Sunday I'll do 10 minutes. So over the course of the week, I will accumulate 20, 25 minutes of direct forearm and grip work, but I just separate it out. Overhand to start with. Slightly heavier for the underhand wrist curls, you're just stronger at them. And you don't need to do them like this. You can do them seated, you can do them with the barbell. I'm just doing something different. I'm going to take a minute's rest, then I'll go through those 2 exercises again. I'm not going to film them, they're pretty boring. You've seen them done once before. So we'll wrap up the video there. I think 2 things. First of all, if you found this sort of content useful, if you found observing, sitting in, so to speak, on how I train and also hearing some of the insights and training tips behind it, then, I don't know, just leave a like, let me know in the comments, whatever you want to do. And second of all, again, just to reiterate, today's workout isn't particularly long. It's taken a while because I'm stopping to chat to the camera, but I could get all of this done in 30, 35 minutes. The key is that everything that I'm doing is effective. The sets that I'm doing them well, and I'm taking them to failure. The exercises I'm doing are effective. I'm just trying to create a signal for muscular growth through my deltoids, my biceps, my triceps, and my forearms. And in order to do that, I don't have to do a ton of volume. I don't have to do 3 or 4 different exercises. I don't have to do 3 sets of each exercise. I just have to do a handful of exercises or a handful of sets really well, very close to or to failure. And once I've created that stimulus, once I've sent that signal, I can move on. I can get on with the rest of my day. And I think if you can take that away from this video, it will give you confidence that actually you don't need to spend so much time doing certain things. So if you're pressed for time and you're always missing certain muscle groups or you're always missing workouts, then have a look at your training week. Do you genuinely need to do all of the things that you are doing there? Or can you get rid of some of the faff? Can you cut down on some of the volume and put more effective stuff in? If you can only go to the gym 2 or 3 times a week, then you just need to be ruthless with the exercises and the sets you are doing because you don't have the luxury of time on your side. And that's okay. That's the same for most of my clients. Do less, but do it better.